A 50-degree high isn't usually cause for a celebration, but after last week's historic storm and frigid aftermath, we're entitled to a case of spring fever. One thing this warm-up can't erase, though, is the reality that it's not just snow but water we have to worry about. Stephanie Lydon reports.
Like so many buildings going up around Boston, this one will offer views of one of the city's greatest assets. And, as we were reminded last week, liabilities. The so-called bombogenesis storm sent the ocean surging from the streets of East Boston
and we just had our legs pushing the door closed
to the downtown offices of Boston Harbor Cruises, where water was knee-deep in a matter of minutes.
I've been here for about 18 years.
Have you ever seen flooding like this?
I have never seen anything like this.
The storm is seen by some not as a one-off, but a warning as sea levels rise.
Which means that these low-lying areas are vulnerable and are going to get hit again and again and again.
Kathy Abbott of Boston Harbor Now says here in the seaport, new buildings weathered the storm. They're built on bases, utilities are on the roof, and sloped parks like this one are designed to send water back into the ocean. But
you know, it was a one-day storm, and it only came so far.
What if we get worse? New buildings may be okay, but the city's old. How do you get around if the streets are flooded and your T-stop's a waterfall?
You can see some of the fault lines in the brick.
And what about older homes in flood zones?
Your boilers, heaters, water coolers, all those things could get wiped out.
Phil Giffey, a longtime affordable housing advocate here in East Boston, is urging residents and the city to make resiliency a priority. The city has a plan for this neighborhood. Among the ideas, a barrier that goes up when water threatens to come in.
What kind of money will it take to make this neighborhood resilient?
Well, it will take millions of dollars. It won't be cheap, but it's going to be a lot less expensive than replacing the potential lives lost and all the other public-private investments that have been made over the past 50, 80, 100 years.
Stephanie Lydon joins me now. Hi, Stephanie.
Hi,
so when you talk about moving furnaces, putting up these barriers, does anybody know what the real cost of true readiness is, or is it all rhetoric?
Well, it's billions. I mean, at the end, billions at the end of the day. Yes, with a B. I mean, moving furnaces, moving electrical, raising homes potentially, building parks that are like seawalls, raising roads. So a lot of money.
Well, you're beyond, what is it called? Deployable barriers. I just saw that there.
Right.
Is that real? I read in another story, I think in the Boston Globe, about these massive seawalls they're talking about in the ocean.
There are two different things. So the deployable barriers are real. There's actually a company out of Norway that makes these. They're called Aqua Walls, and you put them in, deploy them before a storm, take them out when the storm is through. They are looking at creating one for East Boston in a part of the city where the water really flows in, and if they could stop it right at the mouth, they figure they can protect the neighborhood.
How about these seawall things? Is that real?
The seawall is under study at UMass, and this is sort of the aquatic version of the Big Dig. Giant, I mean, from Winthrop to Hull. A wall made out of cement and rocks, like the kind you walk out on the Cape, 30 feet above the high tide, and would create a barrier truly around the...
So are developers required to take into account today rising sea levels in their plans and their requests for permits and authorizations?
So there's no requirement, although they do have to fill out a questionnaire and indicate what they will do in the case of flooding. So that presumably is taken into account when they get a green light on a project. And you've got to figure there's some self-interest. With rising sea levels, developers want to protect their own property.
And last thing, is East Boston, are there other neighborhoods in the city that have resiliency plans other than East Boston, or is this a one-and-done thing?
So they've started with East Boston and Charleston. There's now a pilot project looking at resiliency in South Boston and the Seaport. The idea is to eventually get the whole city planned, but this is a work in progress.
Yikes. Good to see you, Stephanie.
Good to see you,
Thanks
too.
so much. Appreciate it.